It is a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful day. It's almost the end of October, and I found this little nook area. Oh, why is it? Oh, why does this keep happening every time I make a video? Cool stuff. I'll just take it. The rainbows across. What? Okay, stop entertaining yourself, Audrey. I found this beautiful little cove area in this park right next to my office. It is off trail-ish, but I feel like it's got a pseudo trail. So there were signs, don't go off trail, but I mean, it looks like a trail, right? Like that looks like a path. It's not formal, but like it's implied. So I wanted to do a quick channel today. It's a lot of people are having a hard time with optimism right now. For clear reasons. I am not having a problem with optimism right now because I'm kind of childlike all the time these days, which is so funny. I was talking with a friend of mine, was it yesterday? That when I was a child, I was like 36 years old. That's what my mom used to say, and I was so serious. And I know why, because I felt a lot of things, and it was very serious to be a me as a child, and so I was serious. But now I get to be like a child again, but for the first time, and so I feel excited about everything. Like I get to look at nature-y things. I mean, look at this freaking tree. For one, like this tree, like it's beautiful, like all the time, and I'm dressed very much like a 5-year-old. And it makes me really happy, and I think everyone should do that. This was a digression. I do digress frequently. My daughter's always like, get to the point. Okay, I'll get to the point. In my childlike wonder, I'm going to channel something that reflects something good in the world. We need more of that. So, who should I connect to? This would be really cool if I could get a request. I'm planning like a panel channel, and that's going to be a lot of fun because then I can get requests, and it's going to be great. But so until then, I'm just going to pause this till I figure it out. Okay, it's going to be green Terra. Which makes sense because if any of you have ever seen or heard of something called the Sophia Codex, it's a really amazing, if you're in the place to receive it, it's a really amazing book that is activating, and it has a lot of information about like the ascended masters, the feminine masters, like the Sophia, the Magdalene, the Isis. She's my girl, Hathor. And they've got a green Terra, and that's where I'm at in the book right now, so I won't go any farther. But there's a lot of incredible goddess energies. I should explain that first. Yeah, I'm going to explain that first. So a lot of us were raised in a that polytheism is, well, if you were raised in my house, this is like satanic. It's to think of something outside of a singular God, and that God, ironically, being the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit Trinity. That Trinity omits the feminine energy completely. So it's one of the few religions, Christianity and all Abrahamic religions, that really just dissociate the feminine from the foundational creation, which is so funny since we have, womb space to create, which is considered a portal of life. Sometimes I talk really fast about intense things, and people start like they go unconscious while they're talking to me. So I'm being cautious about that right now. But what's so interesting in Judaism, like the mystical Judaic traditions are in the Kabbalah, and then the mystic tradition of the Kabbalah is the Zohar. And I was led to read the Zohar. Let's be honest, I didn't understand the Zohar. A lot of it was like coded, and now I need to go back and listen to it again because I'll understand more of it as it's been revealed. But it goes into like the origin being the Sophia, of the origin female, energy being the Sophia, and from the Sophia came the masculine energy and everything else. And so the goddess and the emanations of the feminine have come up in different faces and stories in all traditions across the world in order to connect to people in different ways what they need. So like there's fierce feminine energy, and then there's like the maternal, nurturing feminine energy. And if you get into mythology, which I wasn't allowed to study as a kid, but if you get into it from all over the world, there are correspondences that go with each other. So fierce feminine energy could be associated with like, did anyone watch Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom? Because I loved that one. And it had Kali Ma, where they were doing like a human sacrifice, pulling a heart out of somebody for Kali Ma. And Kali Ma does not give those vibes at all. Like, yeah, she is wearing a skirt of men's arms and a necklace of men's heads, but it's all symbolic of trying to... A bridge just fell. Weird shit happens when I do this. But it's symbolic of her killing the masculine ego and like evening it out and bringing it into like a more balanced place. And she also is very sacrificial in lapping up the blood of warriors so that when the blood falls to the ground, it's supposed to multiply into more warriors, and she's actually saving people by lapping up the blood. I know that's graphic, but so people are like, well, what gods and goddesses are real? The truth is, this is a secret that you have not been told before, and it is hermetic. It is in the Asclepius. I don't know. No one said it to me, so I don't know how to say it. But Asclepius, Hermes Trismegistus. It's one of the many writings of Hermes, and it's a discourse. So it's like almost like reading a script. It's back and forth of the teacher and the student asking questions, student and the teacher. And I highly recommend this because it has some stuff very relevant to today in it. Anyway, this is getting longer than I thought, but I wanted to give you some background. So in the Asclepius records, Hermes teaches that because we are microcosms of the macrocosms, if you're just like trained Christian, just say we're made in God's image, right? So we're fractals of that image, meaning that we have some godhood in us, right? That spark of light, that spirit in us, we can create with that. And some people create music and poetry and all sorts of crazy stuff, and they can create bad things too, because some gods are fierce. But basically in this amazing book, it's like this big, but everything in it, you just look at my copy, it's just highlighted and underlined, like the whole thing. In fact, it maybe be faster if I just read it straight and I figured everything was important. Get really excited. But so it explains phenomena we experience of like, when you go into a house and it feels like it's haunted and there's definitely ghosts in it, and maybe there is a ghost in it. I mean, that's a thing. Fourth dimensional trapped spirits, that's a thing. But there's also like a collective spirit of an energy that's very intense and focused. And so when a bunch of people believe in one particular energy, like you could tell a story about a ghost story, say. Someone makes it up just offhanded, and then you tell that story over and over and over and over again. Over time, that ghost story then gains the power, usually from like the fear of all the people that heard it, and then it creates its own like little entity. So, and that grows when there's focus on it. It's kind of like, but not really, but don't get offended. Have you ever seen the movie Coco? I love that movie. It hits different now that my parents have dementia, but you know how they talk about how the ancestors only live as long as they're remembered? So that's the same is true with any focused spirit thing, is it only exists if you have stories to tell about it. And so the polytheism, the idea of all these gods, like in Hindu traditions, there's like a bazillion gods, and most mythology. There's just lots and lots of them. Thank you, Zeus, for being such a procreator. But it's just, there's so many. And the reason that they hold any power whatsoever is that people believe in them, right? And then that creates a thing. Does that make sense? I channeled this message once, actually, like in relation to current day. Like, we have these idols, famous musicians, like, let's say, easiest ones would be like Michael Jackson, Madonna from when I was younger, New Kids on the Block. I was obsessed with them in junior high. Or like today, Taylor Swift. And so when these people have focused energy put on them by lots and lots and lots of people, they call them idols, because they have been elevated to a state of idolhood by that focused energy. So if you're like a fan of a famous person, and then you meet that famous person, you're like, oh my God, it's because you think that that person is elevated above you. And because you have put that on them, they're actually holding that idolhood, and they're seen as like human gods, right? And this is not like a lecture that that's bad or anything. That's just like focused energy makes a person, you know, wealthy sometimes, but also like a god on our planet. So if you apply that to a lot of other things, and you understand that all these gods or goddesses that exist around the world, are they real? They're real as long as you believe they're real, right? And so it's like focused energy. And because since I awakened and I've been able to like connect to these energies, before, I swear to you, I would have never believed in any of this shit. Like, honestly, like for real, I wouldn't have believed any of this stuff. And like the first time I connected to Hecate, boy, you can't make that up. You cannot. She goes in and like in your face and knocks you back, and you're like, oh my God, I guess that's real. Wow. So when I bring up, going back to what I was going to do, to connect to Green Terra is one of those focused emanations that holds a vibration. There are a lot of different terras, and I'm not going to speak to those because I haven't studied those and they haven't come to me yet. There's a lot of time for that because I have a whole lifetime. There's also white terra, and there's also yellow terra. There's other terras, okay? I should not be asked about them right now, my apologies. But Green Terra is a goddess that is focused on the elimination of human suffering, under the guise and the idea that we are getting something out of our human suffering. And I have to tell you, when I first heard that, there was like a immediate defense that came out of it. No, we're not. We shouldn't have to suffer because we don't get anything out of it. Why would we want to suffer? But if we suffer, then we get to like be victims. And some people really, really identify with that. And I don't judge that at all, because if anyone, when anyone reads my book that is hopefully coming out in the next couple of months, you'll see that the perspective of a person in their life is often through the lens of victimhood until it's not. And the book was written very honestly from that period of time. And so it has tonal notes of that while still like adjusted to not annoy people. So Green Terra, she like, the first time I connected to her, it was right after, and this is so interesting. A little disclosure here on my part. The first time I connected to her was my way back from dropping my daughter off at college in Utah. And the night I got back, I had been crying because I'm a single mom, and I had just like taken my child and put her in another state, and I left her there. And that was a lot for me. Like, I was happy and, you know, all the complicated feelings, but then I was like, my baby too, you know, and the house was suddenly very clean and quiet. So every night I go on a walk, and my first night home, I was like, I'm going to connect to something that is healing and will nourish my soul. So I was listening to this this Sophia code book, right? And it was kind of like spooky outside because, right before a storm, when animals get their fluff up and they're like, something's coming. That's exactly when I want to go outside. And there had been warnings for lightning storms, and most people would stay inside. Not me. I was like, let's go. And so I went outside, and it was like a lightning storm. It was like just like strobe lights in the air, and it was kind of like a gray overtone. It seems like if I was creating a movie about something foreboding, that would be the note that would be going on. So as I'm on this walk, I'm listening to stuff about Green Terra and inviting her essence into your life to dissolve, allow yourself to release the experience of human suffering. And my fluff got up. I'm like, oh shit. Because then I had connected to her, and she immediately showed me the single mom narrative. And the single mom narrative is real. If you're a single mom, you know that. And it's not something that I want to invite into my field as rooted experience anymore. It definitely was thrust upon me, and also owned of the suffering and the hardship and the abandonment and doing all of it yourself. Because 9 times out of 10, all of those things feel extremely real, and that's hard, instead of looking at all the things about that are actually really beautiful. And so as I'm seeing this lightning storm and the weirdness in the hum in the air, the electricity, everybody's in their houses except for a couple of weird old guys in my neighborhood who got their lawn chairs out, and they're with their beers, and they're like, yep, this here's some interesting weather out here. And they wave at me. I love old guys. They're great. It's cardiac rehab. It trained me to love the old dudes. So that's when I connected to Green Terra, and she taught me that I was getting something out of my suffering, and that to release the suffering actually feels like loss. And so that is who I want to connect to today. That was a big intro. This is the spot. Okay, I'm gonna connect to her in my little comfy crook of this tree. It is no wonder that you hold on to suffering and the experience of humanity as the vibration you live within is heavily weighed with density from all angles, and the suffering around one is so pungent that in order to be seen as a singular of the whole and the experience of life itself must be witnessed by others and set apart by others as being greater in that pungent tone of suffering, to allow for the individual spirit to shine, even if in muted states of pain, to separate from the experience of the darkened, repetitive plight of humankind, to find meaning in perpetual, repeated, darkened states of self-reflection and entrapment from that repetition. We seek to acknowledge the suffering within ourselves as being unique and separate from the other. This is repeated and spoken internally and externally as a modality to acknowledge one's own pain as being exceptional when all around you experience their unique pungency in pain that is either diminished or amplified by their own observation and yours of their suffering. These are all illusions. The separateness, the illusion of separateness, is illusion. Our individuality seeks to bloom and be seen and shine, and when we shine in states of suffering, we still feel that is shining. Look and see how much I have struggled. This then means I deserve blank. That suffering, also an illusion, also self-imposed in the ownership of that illusion, not diminishing the experience as suffering itself, but holding on to is unnecessary perpetuation of said suffering. Instead, to acknowledge the experience of humanity and all of your brothers and sisters surrounding you, this suffering is experienced by all to varying degrees that are perfectly orchestrated for their learning on this planet as a school to polish oneself into a state of perfection. The suffering is needed in order for that perfection to be attained. When a child is learning to walk, they cannot be protected from falling. They must fall in order to learn their balance. The suffering is necessary to perfect the state of walking and then running and then climbing and ascending. The suffering is the same for humanity. However, suffering does not need to be experienced as a singularity of yours alone. Looking around you, you do see other people suffer, quote, more or less than you, offering some kind of reflection to either be grateful or to dismiss perceptions of your own suffering. These comparisons are not helpful, for the internalized experience of suffering is absolute, yet fleeting. When the suffering has diminished and then ended, to hold on to the suffering is then to take ownership of the suffering as part of your identity, and the focus of that suffering then becomes perpetuated, creating an identity within yourself that then shines to you and to everyone else. Before you know, you have become the thing you have suffered from, not yourself. It is a layer that covers up the true you. If one has suffered in any way, be it abuse as a child or partner or wartime or some kind of assault or victimhood around body betrayal in medical trauma, all of these things are truly suffering. There is no diminishment of said suffering, the identity of which, if you take on the identity of the thing that happened to you, you are no longer you, you are the thing that happened to you. Just as when you state that you are a victim of something, you separate yourself from the whole, from the community of humanity as a whole in micro and macro expressions, you then detach from that unity consciousness, further separating yourself from the whole, seeing that we are all united and one, and can be expressions of instead suffering love. Ask yourself, are you your suffering, or are you an individual? And if you are an individual, ask yourself further, are you just an individual, or are you surrounded with a whole? Are you surrounded with a family? Are you surrounded with a community? Are you surrounded with a border of neighbors? Are you surrounded yourself with a system of partners? Are you surrounded yourself with a community to hold up and support each other? Further still, are you part of simply humanity? And if you are part of simply humanity, you see another suffering that is also you suffering. If you release your own suffering and witness the suffering of another, you are able to see that they are in their suffering, and you can allow yourself to assist them in releasing them from their suffering and their identity of suffering beyond the identity of themselves, which in itself is a whole of all humanity. Shed these things, shed the illusions of the individual that is suffering as a lone sufferer. That lone sufferer mentality has served you to make you feel that you matter, that you shine, that you are important, your experience matters in this brief period you exist on this planet. However, the suffering itself limits your experience on this planet as being caged in your own prison that you have created for yourself. Release the suffering, release the prison you have given yourself. It is but an illusion, as is the individual versus the collective. You are all fractals of the all, of the whole one, of the Creator. Suffering is optional. Release suffering. If you are not able to release suffering, ask yourself what suffering is still giving you and what you will lose if you also lose suffering. Know that as a divine being, you yourself are allowed to experience bliss and wholeness with yourself and then with humanity to whatever level and layer you wish to receive. Receiving is difficult. You must first receive from yourself in order to receive from others. To receive from yourself, you have to feel love, feel grace, feel acceptance, feel non-judgment toward the self for getting something of suffering. Witness this potential experience of shame and allow with grace to release that, quote, shame with the love that dissolves all darker states of being. Go into unconditional love of the self, then of the others. Release your suffering. You have suffered enough. You do not need to suffer more. When you release your suffering, you are able to see the suffering of others, help them release their suffering through the emission of love vibration that you will emit. It spreads instead like cancer, it spreads like light. Spread that light of non-suffering, of self-acceptance, of grace, of forgiveness, of self-forgiveness, of the other forgiveness, of the darkness of humanity that has taken over, and allow that light to shine, which brings out the shadows from the darkness into the light, further elevating all consciousness into awareness of one in which you cannot harm one another because you are one. There is no separation. Separation is an illusion. Suffering is also an illusion. There is only one in many fractals emanation of source love. Be that love, emit that love. Be forgiveness, be grace, and suffering. Suffering is an illusion. It was always love. That was so cool. I got so many tingles. That was crazy. I can't wait to rewatch this because I have absolutely no idea what I just said, except that it was really cool. What do you think? Dude.